thank you so much for purchasing our fence course today. I hope you learn a lot through the modules.
We are very excited for you to embark on this journey to increasing your property value, your beauty, and your privacy at your house. We're going to take you through all the steps from demoing the fence to setting the posts to building two different styles of fence, a traditional dog ear vertical style privacy fence and a more contemporary modern horizontal style fence. We're just going to jump into it and get started taking this old fence down.
If you're wondering if you need a new fence, replace your existing one, it should be kind of obvious. Wooden fences last about 30 years depending on the type of wood, whether it's pressure treated pine or cedar. Cedar should last about 30 years, pressure treated pine, you'll get 15 out of them.
It also depends on how well you maintain it throughout its lifespan, with staining every 3 to 5 years and pressure washing a couple times a season. There are three main building components of a privacy fence. There's your posts, 2x4s, and pickets. The posts keep the fence in the ground, the 2x4s keep the pickets together and on the posts. As you can see, this fence was built incorrectly. There should be 3 supporting 2x4s and the post should be 30 inches in the ground with high strength concrete. Obviously, it's not 30 inches in the ground because it's about to come out. Like, we could probably just push this over. 3 support beams should be on the face of the posts instead of in between. Yeah, we're just gonna tear down.
Tools that make it a lot easier to demo your old fence would be a Sawzall, and that's pretty much it. Now, the safest and easiest way to do this is take your Sawzall and cut your 2x4s. So I gotta cut on one side, and I'll do the same thing on the other. And that is already off. So once you cut your 2x4s, you should be able to just push the panel over. If exposing the post. And if it's easier for you, you could cut this in half to fit in the back of a pickup truck or take it to the dump or however you choose to dispose of it. We're going to take ours to the dump. If it's cedar, you could burn yours, but don't burn pressure treated because it's filled with chemicals. Honestly, it would make our lives easier to cut it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it just looks fun. Oh yeah, it's just this though, Sam. So the easiest way that we have found to remove the fence is to take all the panels off first and just leave the posts exposed. And then after the posts are exposed, we get down with a Sawzall as close as we can to the ground and cut it at the base. And then depending on the situation, we'll bury it or dig the post out, depending on where it's gonna go. In this yard, we're just gonna cut it as low as we can and then bury it so they don't see it, because we're moving the fence line over, so we don't want them to be tripping on the old posts. So, after you have the old fence completely down and your job site is fresh, you're ready to start mapping out your fence. The best way to map it out is to choose your corners and then run a string line from corner to corner and end to end, so you have a perfectly straight line to put the middle posts in between right up to the line. And I'll show you exactly how I'm gonna do that right now. These are post hole diggers. To dig a hole, you can also use an auger, but here in St. Louis, there's a lot of bricks and a lot of overpour from asphalt and old foundations of old houses that used to be on this plot of land. So augers have not really worked in our city. They usually work better out in the county. So we're usually stuck using these post hole diggers and possibly a jackhammer to get the old foundation out of the hole and get the hole dug. Holes have to be at least 30 inches deep for fences, and that's just standard building code. They'll tell you that when you get your permit, and usually an inspector will come and inspect your holes before you can put the posts in. So here in this hole, I'm hitting some concrete already. I've got some bricks coming up, and it's honestly not going too easy. For real, this is the hardest part of building a fence, is digging the holes. After you get the holes dug, the rest will be really easy. So after you have your end post holes dug, make sure they are about 30 inches, which we're pretty dang close, depending on which side you're at, but it's good enough. So 30 inches is what you're looking for. So we're gonna set the end posts and then run a string line between the end posts so we know where to put the rest of the posts. So to set the posts, obviously, you take a post, put it in the hole. You'll want to have a bullet level, or any size level really, and some concrete. The kind of concrete you'll want to use is called fast set concrete, and you want to use this because you can mix it in the hole. Other concrete, bagged concrete, you want to mix before you put it in the hole, but this fast set is made for setting posts just like this, so you could put the dust in dry and then the water and mix it up there, and then it'll set perfectly. This part is a lot easier if you have two people, one person just hold the post level and the other to pour the concrete in. If you're doing this by yourself, what we've done is use spare 2x4s to brace the posts straight while you mix the concrete. But if you've got a buddy or a wife or a husband or literally anybody just to hold it straight, that's obviously going to be the easiest way. Before you put in the concrete, you really just want to make sure it's flat with where the post is going to be on both sides, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to level it out and hold it straight while we put the concrete in, and it's okay. So after you get the concrete and the water in, you just kind of want to jab it with probably a rock bar, just get some airflow going in so the water goes all the way through to the bottom and gets all the concrete wet so it sets. The bubbles is what you want, that's how you know it's getting deeper into the concrete. Then after it's set in the hole, you just want to double check just one last time on both sides so you know it's straight this way and it's straight this way, and we are looking good. So after you feel comfortable where this post is, you still got a little bit left. We're just gonna backfill the rest of the hole with dirt just to hide it and let the concrete set, and then we're good on this post. So after we set the two end posts, we ran the string line so we know exactly where to put the middle posts. As well as the string line, we had to measure between each post hole so we know where they go. So the traditional style, the posts have to be 8 feet apart, and the horizontal modern style, the posts are 5 feet apart. Today, we're building a horizontal fence, so after we ran our string line, we measured every 5 feet on the line for a new post hole. So now we're gonna set the middle posts. And once again, you set the middle posts after you have the end posts set in concrete. So to set these middle posts, you do it pretty much exactly how I just showed you on the end posts, but it adds one more step, as well as getting the post level this way and this way. You have to make sure that the post face is just barely touching the string line in between the end posts for the whole face of the post, so you know it's not twisted and you know it's as straight in line as possible.
When you're building a traditional style fence, when your pickets are going vertical, the first thing you want to do after you have your post set is find the placement for the 2x4s for the frame. So how you're going to do that is take your tape measure out, from the top of the post, you're gonna measure down to 30 inches from the top, and then 60 inches from the top. So when you're screwing your 2x4s on, your first 2x4 is gonna be flush with the top, and then 30 inches down, and then 60 inches down. So you wanna make your mark on every single post on your line before you put up your 2x4s, so there's no guesswork. You can just throw them on as quick as possible. Okay, so now that you have everything all marked out on your posts, what you wanna do is screw your 2x4 frame onto your 4x4s. And so how you do that is very simple. The top one goes flush with the top of the post. Just pop 2 screws in each one. And you're at a post and you're going to break it for another 2x4 to continue on the fence line. You want to keep your screws to one side. So I could cut it down the middle to make room for the next 2x4 to continue down the fence line. So I just want to keep that in mind as I'm screwing these together. So now that you have all 3 of your boards on the post for your frame, you kind of want to just make a quick little mark to make it easier on yourself down the middle of these 2x4s, so you can come back with your saw and cut them. And then you probably want to change the depth of your blade just so it just barely goes through the entire 2x4 without digging too much into your post. So once you cut that little bit of your 2x4 off, you have room for your next one to continue down the line. And you just do this over and over again to complete your entire fence line. On a traditional fence, you dig your hole 30 inches into the ground. You should set your post 30 inches into the ground. This is all just for demonstration because we needed to have these posts a little taller because what we're actually building for these clients is a horizontal fence where we need it only 24 inches into the ground to have 6 feet above. So traditionally, if you were to set it at the regular height, it'd be about 5.5 feet. So you'd have about 6 inches of picket above your top 2x4. So we're just gonna mimic that now for this demonstration. And we're gonna get our first picket to be level right here. So when you're nailing these pickets, you could use 1 5/8 screws, but that takes a very long time. We like using a nail gun because it's a lot faster. So once you have your first one on, the easiest way to keep the line on top level is to build this little template out of a scrap 2x4. You just screw 2 pieces on each side. And then you put this guy on top of there. And then you walk over here. Alright, that is pretty much where you want the line to go. So you're going to put a screw in the top just temporarily because we're going to be using this picket with this template and keep moving down the line. Okay, so now that we have our template for the height, we have our mock picket down at the end, we are ready to just start nailing these guys up. Now keep in mind, when you're nailing the pickets, you don't have to make sure every single picket is plumb. I usually just push 3 pickets up, then plumb up the 4th one, 3 pickets, plumb up the 4th one, and so on and so forth. You'll see what I mean here in just 1 second. So now we've nailed a couple on. I'm gonna kind of slow down for just a second, grab my level, see how we're looking. Alright, so that would be plumb, but you can see there's a giant gap there. In a privacy fence, you don't want that. So what we're gonna do is just make that gap over a couple pickets. So it gradually gets smaller and back to plumb. So what we're gonna do, instead of making that big gap, we're just gonna close it just a little bit there. So there's a little gap, just not as severe. We're gonna do the same thing and just keep closing the gap little by little until we're back to plumb. And there you have it. We had to level out probably about 3 of them, but as you can see here, we are back to plumb. So now that that is nice and plumb, I'm just gonna throw up maybe 3 or 4 more, and then we might have to bring it back to plumb, or it might be okay. The only reason it gets out is because these boards warp. When you're building a vertical style fence, the posts in the ground sit a lot lower. When you're building a horizontal fence, they need to be much higher because the top of the post is the top of the fence. And you have to lay out your posts perfectly for the height because your step downs have to go every 6 inches so they break perfectly on a picket. So I start on one side and I find the height that works, roughly 6 feet. If I go 2 inches above or 2 inches below, that's okay. Because as the slope of the ground continues, you'll stay level, and then right here, you can see we're dropping with the slope of the land, but on a complete picket instead of halfway through the picket, because once we start nailing all of the pickets on these posts, then the lines will be continuous along the entire fence line. So the first step of building one of these styles of fences is starting at the top of the post on your entire wall to figure out where you need to cut the post before you start nailing. And as you can see, this one is a little tall, so I made my mark with my leveled pickets. This is my template. I'm gonna take these pickets off, cut the post to the right height before I could start nailing all the pickets on. If you spend the time doing this prep work, when you nail the pickets on, it goes so much faster, so much easier, and goes a lot smoother. When you're mapping out the height of your posts, when you come to a step down like this, your pickets are going to break on a post. Now in this style, on top of these posts, once all of the pickets are nailed on, we're setting a cap on that's getting screwed on from the top of the post. So when you have a step down like this, you have pretty much 2 options to attach your cap after the fence is complete. You could notch out your post to lay your board down on this notch, which is my preferred method, or you can simply nail a 2x4 next to the post and just do it like that. I prefer the notching because it looks way more professional. So I was explaining this notch before for our step down. How I did it, I just traced my pencil lines with my circular saw, and then I finished off the clean cut with the Sawzall. And so what I was explaining before, there's going to be a cap that sits between these 2 posts, just like that, and then the step down is going to sit right here between these 2 posts. And that is why we made that little mark right there. Instead of nailing a 2x4, this just looks so much more clean. Sweet. Now that you have all of your posts cut to size, now you're ready to actually start nailing on your pickets. There's no frame to put up like there is on a vertical fence. So the frame is your post. So now that the posts are all cut to length, we could start nailing up our pickets. And we essentially do it the same exact way that we do on our vertical fence. So we'll just hold this up. They should be flush with the top. we already made sure it was level, but let's double check. Spot on. Boom. Now, once again, like the 2x4 on your frame for the vertical fence, you want to hit these nails just on the right side because we're going to cut this off after the fact. So just make sure that you have enough room to cut it off to add another picket on the left. And just like the vertical fence for those pickets, I'm gonna nail up probably 4 more, check the level again, and then keep going. Now that you have your one section done, what I typically do is just make sure I'm to the left of all the nails, put my board up, put a level on it. Once I've got my level board on there, take my pencil, make my mark. And that should leave me plenty of room just to swipe right next to that line and have room for my new line of pickets. Your blade to the depth, you can double check. If it cuts into the post, it's not the end of the world. And typically what you want to do is not cut or not nail your last picket on the bottom because you need to pre-cut that because you don't have room for your saw. So I forgot to do that myself, so I just gotta take this one off, cut it, and nail back on. It's no big deal. There's only 2 more steps to complete the style of fence. When we build the style, we like a nice clean look. To cover up these seams and all these nails, what we like to do is rip a picket down to 3.5 inches, the same width as your post behind it, and then just nail that right on top of the seam. So we're using a pin nailer, and they're not very strong, so what we like to do is just put a little silicone on the back to keep it on there. Make sure it's level. Press it in there. Make sure that silicone sticks and grab your nailer and just and voila! The seam and the nails are gone. Now all we have to do is add the cap to finish it off. Welcome. This is the last step of your horizontal fence build. Now what you're going to do to find the dimension for this cap on top is measure the back of the post to the front of your fascia, which happens to be exactly 5 inches. So we took our board to the table saw, ripped it to 5 to flush it up on the front and the back. And all we're going to do to attach it is take 3-inch deck screws and just go from the top of the cap to the top of the post. 2 on each side, and that is as simple as that. I love this style of fence because it looks so modern, so clean, and you don't see a single nail. So we followed all the steps on the horizontal gate. Just each section, we just kept repeating the steps, and this is how far we got. You just go down one section at a time, and then pretty soon your fence will be done if you're just patient with it. So now all we have left is the gate. You build and frame a gate pretty much the same way, whether you're building a horizontal or a vertical style fence. So the first thing you want to do is find the desired end height of your gate. So I'm looking at this panel right here, and I want the pickets to follow this pretty exact. So I'm going to measure this section, and it's 70 inches. So when I find my desired end height of my gate, I'm gonna measure it, and it's 70 inches, and then what I'm gonna do is subtract 7, because there's gonna be a 2x4 on the bottom and the top. 3.5, 3.5, that's 7. So my desired height is 70 inches. I'm gonna cut my 2 side pieces for the height at 63. Now the next thing you want to do is find the desired width. And you're going to cut 2 pieces at that length. You're not going to subtract anything, because this quite literally goes side to side. So when I'm measuring it out, there's a couple things you want to keep in mind. Your latch and your hinges. So I'm measuring side to side. It's a pretty big gate. We're looking at 71.5 inches from inside to inside. So normally I take off an inch, just so we have enough room for the latch and the hinges. But with a gate this size, I think I might take off just a little more so we have some wiggle room. So I'm gonna take off 1.5 inches so we could have a little space on the hinges and a little space for the latches. And we do want a little space where the hinges are, because we're also going to add this top piece onto the gate, and it needs some room to be able to open fully. So we're gonna take off 1.5 inches from 71.5. We're just gonna build this gate at 70. Maybe even 69.75 is actually what we're gonna do. Give it just a little bit more. 69.75 is gonna be our width. That is our end result. So we're gonna cut it at that. Use your square as a fence for your saw, so you make a straight line every time. There's 1. We just need 2. It's a pretty big gap, but we're gonna split the difference for the hinges. We'll have half of that gap on each side, which should be appropriate. So you usually don't have a single gate this big. Our clients wanted it bigger because they have a golf cart and a gator and some things that they like to get in and out of the gate. So they just wanted to make sure they had plenty of room. So usually when we make a man gate, we usually build them between 3.5 to 4 feet wide. In this case, it's almost 6 feet, just to make sure there's plenty of room for all the lawn equipment and golf carts that they have. Attaching these things kind of takes a little practice, because you're using a method called toenailing. And what a toenail is screwing it at an angle. So that's essentially what we're going to do inside of the wood. And we're going to attach all of the pieces diagonally like this. And that's what holds it all together. So once it's placed flat, I make sure we have a right angle by pushing my square up to it. And then the best way that I've found to do a toenail is to drill straight into the side only about halfway through your thread. Back it up and then re-angle it to the desired angle, which is about 45 degrees right here. That is one. You can kind of see it a little better here on the outside. So you're just gonna have 2 screws on every corner, and that's what holds this whole gate together. So once you have your box done, only thing left on the frame that we gotta do is the cross beam. So when you're building your diagonal support, what you want to keep in mind is what side the hinges are going to be on. So say your hinges are right here. This is where you want it coming from the bottom. Going to the top, and you want to attach it to this piece and then the bottom of this piece. So what you're essentially doing is in the middle of this square, you are making a triangle that is all screwed together, because then the hinges are supported across the entire width of the gate instead of just the one side. So if you think about it, it's sitting like this, but it's as it sags, it's supporting itself even more. So you essentially just do that by sticking your last 2x4 underneath. On the top, you want it connected to the top, and on the bottom, you want it connected to the side, just like this. And that is where you're going to get the most strength and support from. And then just make your mark. I usually go T for the top, B for bottom. Okay. Now we just cut this. Right here, and look at that. So when you're screwing everything together, just kind of think 2 screws per seam. So, okay. Take 1 screw, kind of just go straight through here. And now usually what I just do is toenail this from the top. It's also kind of a tricky connection there, but you can do it. Just go straight down, back it up, and then add your angle. There you go. Just do that one more time at the top, and we have a completed frame. One more good measure here. All right. Now you are ready to lift this baby up, see what you got. So So now you have our gate. It's all framed up. And these clients wanted the gate to swing into their yard. Now, depending on the situation, you might have the gate swing out, but in this situation, we had it swing in. So if it swings out, you want to put your hinges on top, which means you'll have to put the pickets on your gate before you hang it. But in this situation, if it swings in, then we could just put the hinges on the inside of the frame. So we just use these heavy duty latch or hinges right here. What we like to use these timber locks to put the hinges into the post right here. They're just stronger than the factory screws that come with them. And then we just use deck screws for these. And then they just go on the top 2x4 and the bottom 2x4. And it's that easy. Now that the gate is hung, we're just screwing these pickets on here. 2 on each side, 1 down the middle brace. We're doing them full length, and then afterwards we're just going to snap a line and cut them. We'll get a cleaner look that way. And then we just gotta do 2 pieces of the fascia, a cap on top, and we're ready to roll. Now you got all your pickets on. Just transfer your line over. You measure at the top how much your picket hangs over from the 2x4. Do the same thing at the bottom. Snap your line or draw a line or whatever is easier for you. And now what you do, you just set your blade to the width of these boards, and then you can just start cutting away here.
Perfecto.
Now all we gotta do, before we put on the latch, we're gonna put our 2 pieces of fascia on and the cap. And then we'll probably have to make a little notch for the latch, maybe, maybe not. And then the whole thing is complete. And now the latch is very self-explanatory. Put the little rod out to catch the gate. As it kind of closes, this catches the rod, mouth opens, keeps it closed. It's really that simple. This all comes together. Handles are sold separately. Latches are sold separately. And then over here, you just screw it onto the side. It opens up like this. Closes automatically, pull it up. And before you put the latch on, you want to make sure that your trim is all done, because everything goes on top of your fascia boards. So after we get the pickets on, we put the fascia, the trim up top, and then put on all the hardware. That is complete.